This is light work. Let me testify. This gon' be the year that I break every cycle. Let me testify, right hand on the Bible. I was tripping, chasing every empty title. Now I'm locked in, living like a walking Bible. He ain't failed me yet.
Let's tell the truth about something the church doesn't always handle well, something the church doesn't always get right. And that is that we have been told to forgive. Before anyone ever asks what actually happened to us or our feelings about it, and when you don't move on fast enough, the label shows up, bitter. Suddenly your grief becomes a character flaw. Your anger becomes a spiritual issue. But what if what we're calling bitterness is actually pain that never had a space to be processed? What if it's grief that never had language to it or something to name it or call it? Welcome to the Yes Work podcast. We're your hosts, Lady B.
I'm Dr. Blair.
And I am Dr. DQ.
Ladies, so this is a space for women who want their lives, their relationships, and leadership to align with God's will. No, not through perfection. None of us are perfect, but through honesty, through obedience, and the courage to face what God is actually doing in us. Because transformation, it doesn't happen through pretending. It happens through yes work.
Yes.
So, yes, I love the Yes Work podcast, and I know you all do too. So before we get into today's conversation, if this podcast has been helping you think deeper, heal, or see things differently, we ask that you take a second to follow us, subscribe to the show, leave a comment. And if an episode has ever made you just pause, reflect, or even send to a friend, we would love for that quick review or your rating. So your feedback, it really helps us to make sure that we are covering some of the needs and questions that you all have. It also helps us reach more women who are navigating some of these same conversations. This episode is for you. If you've been told to just forgive and move on, but something in you still hurts. You've experienced betrayal, or maybe you've experienced disappointment or spiritual harm that was never acknowledged. This episode is for you if you want freedom, but you don't know how to let go without pretending it didn't matter. Or if you've been called bitter when you were actually wounded.
Y'all, this is an episode. This is an episode for you, for me. That's truth right there. I think it's great to acknowledge just again the growth journey that we are on as your hosts right alongside with you. So with this particular episode, we really want to slow it down before even jumping in and just talk about something that often gets lumped with bitterness, and that is resentment. So a lot of people use those words interchangeably and they think that they mean the same thing, and they actually show up very differently. I had to literally look up the definition before even getting into the reflective space of doing this work. So before we even jump in, I just want to, because my curiosity is just, it's there. My senses are tingling. I want to ask the ladies first, what do you think the difference is between resentment and bitterness? And then we'll put it against kind of Google and Webster's definition.
These are definitely both words that stir up very strong and passionate feelings. When I think of bitterness, I think about being upset and bothered and holding on to something that I care about, that I wish were different, but for whatever reason it isn't. And it has now affected me in how I move, how I operate, maybe even how I communicate. But then when I think about resentment, I am upset about something and I want to push something away or to push someone away because I feel like this thing had an effect on my life that is irreversible. The resentment is something that has essentially scarred me and it's left a permanent mark. So in essence, bitterness is something that I can get over, but resentment has scarred me in some way or another.
Wow, that's good. Those are hard, Dr. Blair. And, those two words are so close. And we definitely do use them interchangeably. When I think about resentment, I think more about it as a feeling, a response to someone doing something wrong to me, someone betraying me, or me being disappointed, or something unfair that's just happened to me. And I think when I think of bitterness, it's what happens, I think, when it's prolonged. Feeling stays too long. That's me not doing anything about it, or the other person hasn't done anything about it. It's unresolved. So then it begins to kind of take on my actions, or how my heart, or how I respond to that person.
That's good. That's real good. And I think that just even in both of you defining it, that we're able to see just the difference in interpretations. There are some commonalities and similarities. So I know I said I'm going to give what the dictionary definition is, but we're going we going to ground it in scripture, in the
Okay.
word first, because
Right?
again, culture gets it wrong. So I want to direct us to Hebrews 12:15. It says, see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. I want us to draw our attention to the phrase root of bitterness. When we think about bitterness, we can think about how with roots, they go deep, they grow slowly. They are the foundational piece of the plant, the tree, whatever it may be. So a root grows beneath the surface. So this is our warning in Hebrews 12:15 that bitterness spreads beyond the original impact, experience, intention, that original hurt, and it affects relationships, it affects communities. So it spreads very wide, because we can think about trees that are uprooted and it'll be miles away. And it's like, oh, that's the root from that tree down in
Mhm.
so-and-so's house. Yes, yes, it is.
So this also makes me think about, your example of the tree. And I do not have a green thumb, but it makes me think about the fact that for something to grow, it has to be planted, but it also has to be cultivated. It has to be
Come on.
fed, right? So if we are planting, or if something or someone has planted that seed in us, for it to grow into full grown bitterness, something has contributed to it time and time again. Something has fed it time and time again. And I think that
Good word.
that is how we get into these situations where we are fully bitter, where we are rooted in bitterness. Maybe we didn't recognize that it was being fed and cultivated. We didn't recognize that something was contributing to it, and we just didn't address it in the moment. But to Dr. Blair's point, this happens over time.
Yeah.
Let me just say, you ladies are amazing. So if we go to now the secular definition, right? When I asked Google to just give the difference, it talked about the primary difference lies in focus and duration. So when we think about resentment, it's usually targeted. It's a specific person. It's a specific act, typically of like injustice. Like, I felt like you that wasn't okay. Like, I got feelings around this. It's our first response of being wronged in a situation. Whereas bitterness is often generalized or pervasive, and it's affecting a person's entire outlook. So even Dr. DQ, as you're talking about, like, it has to be fed, it has to be watered and cultivated. And it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like, well, you did me wrong this one time. Now I'm looking at you real funny. And let me just add it to the checklist of things that are contributing to the hurt that I already feel about you. And it may have not been ill intent, but
Right.
however we're interpreting it, it's now feeding into that root system. Do plants either, but our gardeners out there, give us the correct language, listeners. But it's feeding into what is developing underneath the surface, and it's getting stronger and it's getting deeper. So bitterness can happen when that pain sits for so long that it starts shaping how we see people, how we see situations, how we see God. Ooh,
Yes.
some of us are bitter around how we feel like God is supposed to show up in our life, how we feel like, hey, you said it in the word that I'm supposed to get the desires of my heart, and that I'm supposed to have prosperity, and I'm supposed to have all these things. Where they at? Hold on now. So this
Where
is
they
a
at,
covenant.
girl?
It's a contract here. Hold on now. What part are you doing? But if we don't see things manifesting the way that we want to, that bitterness towards God can show up. How is
Mm,
that being watered and cultivated in your life? Oh, this is good. Y'all are good.
good stuff.
This is good, good. This is good. I hope y'all are saying this too, listeners. But I want you all to think about and to ask yourself as we dive into this, further into this episode, is what I'm feeling right now resentment from a wound that maybe needs attention, that needs some nourishing? Or is it bitterness from something that's been sitting unresolved for way too long? So just sit in that. I know we have reflective prompts later on in our episode for you all, but start right now with, what am I feeling? What am I experiencing right now? Is it resentment? Is it this one-time moment? Or is this bitterness and something that's been marinating and cultivating for a while?
So I think that highlights and that names exactly what we can no longer ignore or unsee, is that a lot of what gets labeled as bitterness is actually that unprocessed grief. So of course, faith tells us to forgive. Now we're
Right.
often told forgive and forget, but that pain was never acknowledged. And so it doesn't just disappear. So how many of you have forgiven but have found it difficult to forget?
Me.
Mm.
Yeah. So, what is the saying? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So we have reason to sit up here and keep record of what has been done to us and the wrongs that have been done to us. But there is a fine line. You can recall and get to common ground for yourself, a new understanding of how to possibly interact with other people, but you still have to deal with the pain. If you don't deal with that pain, then you're going to feed that root of bitterness that we're talking about. So we live tension where we want peace, but we still feel angry,
Mad.
big mad. We want to move forward, but we feel stuck in what happened. We feel like we just cannot move past. We try to, okay? But sometimes we just cannot ignore, we cannot forget what happened. And sometimes we want to forgive without pretending it didn't cost us something, because for us to forgive you the way the Bible tells us to, we are giving up something. We might be giving up a piece of ourselves or a piece of our sanity or a piece of our heart. So sometimes that bitterness, we have to recognize that it's not the sin that we think it is. Sometimes it is the signal that something sacred has been broken. It's a pain that we haven't dealt with. And honestly, that's an opportunity for us to grow with God. We have to recognize these opportunities that we can bring to the Lord and help deal with and process for us. So think about it. Have you ever been told to forgive and told to forget and really wondered why you struggled to do that? You want to deep down in your heart. You want to let it go, but there is something, it's tighter than a baby grip. So listen, it's hard. It's tough. I can't tell you nothing I don't know.
Mm.
I've been there. So we've all
Okay.
had these moments where we realize that something we were carrying, like it wasn't just frustration, it was absolutely something deeper. Again, bitterness, it did not show up overnight. It was fed, it was cultivated, it grew, it bloomed, it blossomed.
That's good.
So we are very grown, very adult, very professional Black women.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are.
According to society, we've probably experienced some bitterness. So let's talk about it. Let's throw it out there. How has this showed up in our lives?
First, huh? Here we go. Okay. So, all right, listeners, all right, my ladies here. I know my ladies have heard this story, so I am going to be strong in telling it to the public. I'll share a personal story around my family. When our first child was born, those early months, they was rough. They was real hard. I remember the doctor saying, like, sleeping through the night is statistically, like, they can sleep for 2 to 4 hour stretches. And I was like, when that's going to happen? It was about 9 months before my beautiful baby girl started sleeping through the night. So my husband had to go back to work eventually, right? Paternal leave is nothing like maternal leave. either way, where both partners don't get enough time when it comes to newborns. But at night, he would choose to sleep in the basement while I stayed upstairs with our child. And so I was tending to our child completely on my own through the night. First child, didn't know what I was doing, brand new mama, scared I was going to break her, exhausted from just not getting sleep. And again, she didn't sleep through the night until she was about 9 months old. And I had to start going back to work at 6 weeks. That's all I got. So
It's a whole nother episode because this American system does not respect mothers.
Mothers.
we can look at other countries and see the leave that they get. 6 months, 9 months, a full year, full paid, because they know how important those initial months are with a child and their parent.
This don't make no sense.
None. So for those that have been listening to us for a while, I shared that I do have parental issues specifically related to my father. He was absent. And so this situation with my husband tapped into something deeper for me. So abandonment is a very sensitive place in my story. Because of that, not having my father around, I carried very high expectations around what fatherhood should look like, what it should feel like, how present a man should be for their family. So when I felt like I was left alone during one of the most vulnerable times and moments in my life, it didn't just feel like exhaustion to me, or it wasn't sadness. Like, it was abandonment all over again. It was things that I had held on for years, not even having my father around, that was just festering and marinating and cultivating in me. So even though my husband has apologized many times, y'all, to the point where he's actually asked for forgiveness and used those words as it relates to what happened in our experience. And I say our experience, right, with our first child, even though we've gone to therapy, even though we did intensives and tried to work through it, it only takes a little. Any small trigger, and I go right back to that mindset. I remember thinking to myself, I did everything right. I got married first. You know what I'm saying? Then I had the child. All these things. Like, why would I not get that protection and safety and that support and help, that partner, helpmate that I was supposed to have? So any little thing would trigger me, and I would say, you can't be trusted. You left me when I was most needed. And carrying that belief had a huge cost for me. It created distance in our relationship. It affected our emotional connection. It is a very deep scar, a very deep root, right, of distrust and confusion. And it even kind of affected my relationship with my daughter in some ways. I can think about moments where I would do things with her and it would just be me and her. I remember telling myself, like, I need to protect this bond. I need to prove that I don't need anyone else. You want to see a strong, independent Black woman? Here she is. You don't want to be here at night? Well, you're not going to be here during the day either. I was posting things on social. I'm not even active on social media. I was like, let me just show the world, like, it's just me and her. Another subtle way to even have a jab and a dig at my husband, because there would be times where we would go places I wouldn't even say, like, hey, we're going to the library. I'm just going because you don't want to be here at night. You're not going to be here at day. So I was even feeding into my bitterness and the hurt I was holding on to. And it wasn't protecting anyone, but I felt like it was what was needed. I was keeping the wound alive and didn't even realize it. But you know, I think that when it comes to my work and acknowledging the fact that I'm still in this work, forgiveness for me, which I know is the antidote, right, to bitterness, to resentment, I just don't know how to do it. Because in my mind, I remember having arguments with my husband and saying, like, you still haven't forgiven me. You still not over it. And I'm like, I have forgiven you. I think.
Have you?
Right. I am the type, y'all, where if you give me a manual, I will read it. I will do all the things. I will follow instructions. And I don't have clear instructions around the forgiveness piece and how to uproot these roots that are so deep so I can pull this weed out. Because bitterness it's a weed. It is something you could spray, that weed be gone, the ortho, all the things. Again, we not gardeners here, but you could spray that thing, but it's like a perennial. It'll just keep coming back. It's seasonal. We just really bank in on this theme of plants, even though none of us can grow them. None of them. But it's deeply rooted, and it was and still is potentially, right, a place of work for me and my journey with God and my relationship with my husband and all the things. So that's why I say this episode, it was for me. For me all day.
Yeah, all day. I want to say, well, first of all, like, just thank you for just being open and vulnerable and sharing your heart, right? Because it's not easy to share that. I I can really feel your heart and the hurt and pain that comes with it. And I think when Dr. DQ brought up about the roots, right? And you brought it up too. And I think it definitely goes back to your roots before your husband, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how were those roots established? How were they being nourished at that
Yeah.
time, And those roots that we have that we built from early on as a child can impact your future self, your current self in your relationship or whatever that is. And I don't think there is a manual to it, right? It would be very nice, but I think
It would.
ultimately it is exactly what you're doing. You are aware, you're speaking to it, you are seeking God. And I think it's a journey. I think it's going to take time, and thank God your partner is patient with you in this and understanding. And I'm excited for the journey, right? Like, I think your heart is speaking to someone that's listening today on this for sure.
So
And yeah. Well, switching gears a little bit, when it comes to bitterness, I think for me, I'm not a person that typically holds on to something very long. And it's not to say that I'm in this place of like, I'm spiritually mature, I got it all together, because that's not what I'm saying. It's more of, you all have heard me say this in past episodes, but I struggle with my tongue. Whatever comes out sometimes comes out. My tongue will move faster than my emotion sometimes. So if something bothers me, I have to speak on it, right? And so I think for me, when I speak on it, I'm able to, in my mind, to release it. I try to definitely just release it, because it bottles up and I can't do it and I explode. And then once I'm able to share that, then I just kind of let it go. I kind of just drop it to the side. But I will say, over time, I've definitely have had to learn how to slow down and process what I'm feeling, right? If anything, I've definitely struggled with vulnerability. Sometimes it's easy to be angry, and I can associate that with bitter as well. That's all kind of related, but it's protective, right?
mm,
It's like my defense mechanism. And being vulnerable requires you to admit that something hurt you,
mm-hmm.
or you may have did something wrong, and that's uncomfortable.
Yep.
That's uncomfortable for me. And sometimes, and it's just definitely the harder thing to do. But one thing I will say that I have learned over time is that bitterness is heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally don't like carrying heavy things in my spirit. I've watched others, people have resentment, and I can see, that it can drain joy. It can distort a relationship. It can keep those old wounds alive long after, the moment has passed. So for me, forgiveness has often been less about the other person and more about refusing to carry something that isn't healthy for my spirit or my soul.
I'm a weightlifter over here.
And you know what? You a weightlifter, but you know what? What's important is that you have community, you have sisters, and because we are called to be weight lifters with you, we got you. We got
Yeah. Yeah, girl. So thinking about this particular topic, y'all, I was like, I can't relate. I don't feel like I have any bitterness. But in listening to both of you ladies speak, y'all, for the longest time, me and my husband, we were team one and done with having kids. We had our firstborn, Tristan, and the imbalance that I experienced with the roles of being a parent were so extreme that I was like, nope, we're not having no more kids. And so I still don't think I was bitter. I think at that point it was that resentfulness because I had let my feelings dictate essentially what our family would look like moving forward. Because there was a point my husband wanted more kids. I was like, no. Not to mention, I was in school, I was doing extracurriculars. So when you pile on what I'll call an imbalance from my perspective, of the roles with still working, still wifing, and a student, and we're talking about introducing more kids. I was like, thanks, but no thanks. We're just gonna be team one and done. And it really took a lot of growth, a lot of communication for me to get to the point where I felt like, okay, now we can consider growing our family. And of course we did, but I don't think it ever landed as bitterness. It was resentfulness. And I think one thing that I was able to do, one thing that kept this resentment from turning into a bitterness where it dictated how I interacted with my husband, was that I was very honest and transparent with him as much as I could be back then. I couldn't always name what was really bothering me, but I tried.
And I look back right at my notes, especially when processing through this, and even just going back to Hebrews, right? The root of bitterness, the warning that bitterness spreads beyond the original hurt and affects relationships, affects communities. When we think about Dr. DQ naming is right, just being able to name what I was experiencing, whether it was hurt, shock, confusion, it spread beyond me. Like it impacted my relationships. And maybe there is a freedom that comes from naming that. But I'm wondering if there's a way to kind of, do that processing and look through different situations and see, did it spread? How did it affect other people? And I think that your timing was beautiful, especially thinking about your family and the story that you just shared. And I'm wondering how that impacted, your husband, the way that Jason kind of saw the situation. Like, man, it's supposed to be a group. Wait, what you mean? No, I know I asked you and it was a yes or no question, but you just gonna say no like that? If you all could see Dr. DQ's face, she said,
Yeah.
yup. And let me say it in a different language for you. No. But it is the wondering of like, how did my hurt, my pain, my experience spread beyond just me and affect other people? And I think I struggle with that for sure because I know that holding on, being this heavyweight champion, that's what I feel like. I don't want to be, but I know it affected my marriage. There's a lot of areas I could have gave as far as examples and bitterness. But thinking about how does it affect other people? Because it's different when it just cultivates in you, right? And you feel it. But when it spreads to other people, I think is something that maybe that's the catalyst and motivator for some to know that like, ooh, it's not just impacting me anymore. It is other people that are affected by my hurt, my pain, my whatever.
If I would have stuck with that decision, we wouldn't have my daughter.
I know.
I mean, and she's such a blessing. Both of my kids are, but I can't imagine
I can't
not.
either, y'all.
I
And we
know.
just got her. She just celebrated her birthday last month.
Wow. We've already started to introduce some scripture, right, into this. And uh, God is good. And I know one thing that we do is pray before we start every recording for our podcast. And I just, I know that this conversation is much needed and not just for, any one particular here, but for many women, many of us that's listening. Because what do we do, right? What do we do when we are faced with bitterness or resentment? And God wants us to forgive. right? And I think that sometimes culture, like we talked about culture, and even in the church ministerial spaces, we misunderstand what forgiveness actually means. And forgiveness, it doesn't mean that you have to pretend that something didn't hurt you. And it doesn't mean that what happened to you or the feelings, experiences that you had were okay. And it doesn't mean that trust is going to automatically be restored, right? So sometimes it takes a while for that trust to build back up again. But what forgiveness actually does for the individual is that it's going to release the weight, right? So Dr. Blair, the heavyweight champion,
Of the world.
sometimes we have to release that weight and drop the weight, right? And if we're honest, a lot of women are carrying weight they never meant to hold this long. There's moments where someone has disappointed you. There's moments where someone has walked away from you. There's moments where something sacred in a relationship was broken and life had to keep moving like nothing even happened. And sometimes we don't even realize, right? We don't realize what we're still carrying. And it shows up in how quickly we shut down, right? There's many of us that will shut down ourselves, shut ourselves off to the world, be in isolation. It can show up in how hard it is just to trust again. It can show up in the quiet voice in the back of our head or our mind that says, don't let that happen to you again. Don't let them say that. Don't do that. And sometimes when we talk about forgiveness, people bring up the phrase, turn the other cheek, right? But that's actually one of the most misunderstood teachings in the Bible. Turning the other cheek does not mean ignoring the harm or allowing it to continue. What Jesus was teaching was about refusing to live in retaliation, refusing to let someone else's actions shape who you become, who you're becoming. Because bitterness keeps us tied. As we talked about earlier, bitterness will keep you tied to the moment of pain. It will keep replaying in your mind what happened. And over time, it will quietly shape how we see people, that particular person, that particular situation, how we see the relationships, and even how we see God. And so scripture in Ephesians 4:31, it says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you. That verse is not about shame. It's about having freedom. God cares about the weight that we're carrying, right? He knows the weight bitterness puts on our hearts, the human heart. He's not asking us to deny, those wounds or the things that we have to cover up with band-aids because those band-aids are temporary. He's inviting us to release the hold that it has on us. And sometimes God is gently asking us the question, do you want to keep carrying this? Or do
No,
you want to be free?
it's heavy.
Do you want to keep carrying this or do you want to be free? Right? So freedom doesn't erase the entire story. It doesn't pretend the hurt doesn't matter, but what it will do is release the weight so that moment no longer can control your heart. And that's the freedom that God is inviting us to. Not pretending that nothing happened, but choosing not to live the rest of our lives chained to the moment when it did. Break every chain. Break every
Hallelujah.
chain.
Let me tag on to the end of that. I think it's important for us to point out that we're forgiving other people, but we also have to forgive ourselves for
Yes,
being
that.
bitter and forgive ourselves for being resentful because it's so easy for us sometimes to operate in our same MO, to go with what's comfortable, that we would rather keep it up than to actually walk in forgiveness of ourselves too. And it makes me think about previous episodes when we've talked about how we also forgive our children. If we forgive our kids, we don't want them to still beat themselves up and still carry around that guilt or those feelings of shame. Like that would break our heart. So it's okay for us to also forgive ourselves and walk with that lighter load. It's not worth it. And I always talk about gray hairs, baby. You don't need no gray hairs. You don't need no more. Forgive yourself and make that how you prioritize your own growth and your own relationship with God too.
So I jokingly said that this episode was for me. Oh my goodness.
It's all right, sis. You know we got you.
We are here. Here for you.
So yeah, I jokingly said that this episode was for me. And maybe it was. Yes, Lord.
That's good.
And my prayer is that there are a number of listeners, especially with the addition of forgiving yourself
Yes.
and not holding on to, being disobedient or not allowing that weight to be lifted. I think that we can pray all day like, Lord, help me to forgive. Lord, give me all these things. And then because it's comfort or whatever it may be, this desire to just hold on to the feelings that we're saying that we're trying to give away and trying to give to God. So he knows our hearts and he wants such great things for us, and we have to want those things as well. So I think about myself, where I am in this journey. I think about those listening, and my prayer again is that something resonated, that this will be a spark to a number of people so that they can begin to forgive themselves, forgive others, and just get to this space of freedom.
Maybe this will get us closer to that fairy tale, right? Especially when we think about the bitterness and resentfulness that people carry in their relationships. I know Lady B has talked about how she wanted that fairy tale when she got married. And maybe through this forgiveness, through removing this bitterness, this removal of resentment, we can start to create our own versions of our fairy tales. They might be cultured, but this is us crafting and building the life that we want to live.
Mm.
And I think that that's important too, because I can remember times when I've been upset with my husband and I was livid. I was up there, the highest level that you could be. And at the end of the day, I'm like, this is my guy. This is husband. And I do want to be married to him. I do want this picture of happiness, and this ideal relationship is not perfect, but it is the goal for how we interact with each other, how we see each other, how we communicate with each other. So just to tag on to what Dr. Blair is saying, I think this is how we as Black women start to cultivate the lives in the relationships that we want.
I love that. That was good, and I think what stands out is the fairy tale. Yes, but that freedom, opening yourself up to that freedom, it allows you to kind of create what it is that you want and what you desire. So, but maybe the real question isn't just, do I need to forgive? Maybe the question is, what is this bitterness protecting me from feeling?
Mm-hmm.
Because underneath bitterness, there's often something deeper that we've talked about, right?
Yeah.
In those roots, right? There's grief, there's disappointment, there's betrayal, there's loss. And naming that honestly is often the first step towards healing.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
bringing that
you,
to God, right? And we think about how we've shared that, go to him honestly. He already knows the things. He needs you to say it out loud. And so this very much falls in alignment with that. I think there's just that fear of even being vulnerable with God, right? And unpacking and saying some of the things that hurt. And I would say I'm very blessed as far as my upbringing, etc., trials and tribulations for sure. But I know stories of people who, can't even imagine. And unpacking that, recognizing again how it's spread in other areas, and then being able to name it so we can then exercise our power over it, the power that God has given us that can be activated in us, I think is really exciting.
You don't have to rush the process, but you also don't have to carry the weight forever. And sometimes one of the healthiest ways to begin processing what you're carrying is simply to reflect. So for some women, that might look like journaling. So just wanted to encourage you all to take a quiet moment and spend time with God, right? Honestly, talk, to yourselves in the shower, like we always suggest, honestly about what you're feeling instead of pushing it down. So you might ask yourself, what pain in my life have I been calling bitterness? That might actually be grief. Or what would it look like to release the weight of this without denying what happened? Because sometimes when we put words to what we're carrying, we finally give our hearts permission to begin healing. So your yes this week might not be a big spiritual moment. It might simply just be acknowledging the hurt instead of hiding it, being honest with God about what you're carrying. So say it loud, let yourself process it, write it down, and we want to be a part of that journey and healing with you.
Y'all, bitterness is heavy. And so was this episode just a little bit. We really got in there with some of these lived experiences and these real life moments of reflection that we each had in this episode. So we hope that you were able to have some reflections of your own. So if this conversation touched you or inspired you, or if you were able to connect with it in some way, we are so grateful for that and we appreciate you. But we want to reiterate that you're not alone in this work. So there are many women that are carrying around the wounds that they never gave space to process. And so part of this work is really us creating this space together. So as we've talked before, get with your homegirls, your girlfriends, your sisters. When you get ready to call them up and let me tell you what he did today, do that. And know which friends you can go to. Build that community, but make sure that y'all are bringing it back to that moment of reflection, that moment of carrying it to God, that moment of taking that first step towards healing and really getting to the root of what that issue is and what that hurt is. So if this episode was helpful for you to put language to something you've been feeling, definitely like it, rate it, share it with a friend. Don't forget y'all can have those listening parties. It helps this work reach more women who are walking through these same concerns and these same challenges. You're not alone. We are building a community. So thank you for being here with us, for listening, for wrestling with these conversations, for doing the work together, and for doing the yes work in your life, because God is worth it. And so,
Amen.
yes, thanks